Right.
All right, we're at 2:30. We're at time. Roman, do you want to go ahead and just kick us off?
Okay, sure will. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome and thank you for being here for this critical conversation on voting rights. Let me start by saying this very clearly. The right to vote is the foundation of our democracy. And right now, that foundation is being tested. Across this country, we are seeing rising barriers, growing confusion, and increasing pressure on our electoral system. From changes in voting laws to redistricting efforts that weaken community voices, to misinformation that leaves voters uncertain about their rights. The stakes for 2026 are already taking shape, and for our community, these stakes are real. Because when access to the ballot is limited, when voices are diluted, and when people are discouraged from participating, our communities lose power. And that is something we cannot allow. All at LULAC, we have made it very clear. We will fight in the courts, we will organize on the ground, and we will make sure that our community is informed, prepared, and empowered. But this work requires all of us. It requires vigilance, it requires education, and it requires action. That is why today's presentation is so important. We have brought together leaders and experts who are on the front lines of this fight, individuals who are working every day to protect voting rights, challenge barriers, and ensure that every eligible voter has a voice. They will provide insight into what is happening right now, what we should expect moving forward, and most importantly, what we can do about it. Here's how today's session will work. Each of our speakers will share their perspectives and expertise, and we'll conclude with a discussion on key issues and strategies. Because protecting voting rights is not just a moment, for us, it is a movement. With that, it is my honor to introduce our first speaker, and that is Catherine Pichardo. She's the president and CEO of Latino Victory. Catherine leads Latino Victory, a national organization dedicated to building Latino political power. She brings a sharp and grounded perspective on what communities in states like Arizona and Nevada are experiencing right now, and on why the stakes heading into 2026 could not be any higher. Catherine Pichardo, take it away.
Muchísimas gracias. Good afternoon. Buenas tardes. Thank you to LULAC for getting us together, and to everyone who joined today's presentation. My name is Catherine Pichardo. I'm the president and CEO of Latino Victory, a national organization very much focused on building Latino political power at all levels so that our voices and values are reflected in the policies that move our country forward. And make no mistake, voting rights are under siege, and our American democracy is in peril if we don't act now. Disproportionately, the poor, women, and communities of color are also under attack. And let's break that down for a second. Latinos are the second largest voting bloc in the nation. Our votes can decide the 2026 midterm elections and in 2028, the presidential election. So the opportunity is clear. And at the same time, the threat to those in power who want to suppress the vote. Right now, we can tell you that over 36 million Latino voters were eligible to vote in 2024. 1.4 million new Latinos become eligible to vote every year. And by November of this year, 2026, roughly 2.8 million additional Latinos will have become eligible since 2024. So the fact is that the House majority runs through Latino districts. Of the 61 congressional seats that are projected to determine control of the House, 39 are Latino influence districts, which means that small shifts in the Latino population and participation can move outcomes. And electorally, and by extension, our political power that we have fought for and gained is at risk. Our communities are facing laws that make it harder to vote, not easier. And the fact is that the weakening of the Voting Rights Act, which is at risk of suffering its final blow from the Supreme Court, is a catastrophic setback. Republican majority state legislatures across the country also have passed state laws that restrict voting access, laws that disproportionately impact, as I mentioned earlier, communities of color, women, young Americans, low-income people, and older adults. Now, the Republicans in Congress are also pushing the SAVE Act, which will make it harder for historically disenfranchised communities to vote. And a personal point of privilege here, this is not the Save America Act. This is the Save Donald Trump and Save the Republicans Act. This will require proof of citizenship documents that are not easily available and are costly. The fact is that most Americans don't have a passport. And this act also restricts the use of driver's licenses or real IDs as an opportunity to present proof of citizenship. So not only do these small changes make a huge difference in voter eligibility, but they also eliminate vote by mail and online voter registration, among other voter suppression provisions. So that's the kind of conversation that we'll be engaging with today. We're very grateful to have the Secretaries of State of Arizona and Nevada who have joined us today as we discuss these voter suppression efforts that will erode the progress that Latinos have made over the past decade, not only to expand access, but also to persuade Latino voters that our vote matters and that we have a right to choose our government. The stakes have never been higher. In Nevada and Arizona, the election results always reverberate across the nation on election night. In Nevada, voter suppression laws will affect 22% of the Latino eligible voter population. And in Arizona, these laws will affect 25% of eligible voters, or 1.3 million Latinos. This will exacerbate the barriers that we already know in terms of limited voting through lack of access to voting sites, mail voting access, etc. So once again, members of the Trump administration have expressed support also for sending ICE officials to voting sites. This is a dangerous, un-American act that would impede access to the ballot box for Latinos and other affected communities. Over the past election cycles, we've seen tremendous upward trends as the Latino electorate evolves, and we have seen growth in engagement. So I will stop there, and I will say this. The 2026 midterm elections will be decisive, and we have the power to fight back. As Latino organizations, elected officials, and community leaders, we must stay on the front lines to thwart the voter suppression of the SAVE Act, educate our communities on their voting rights, and provide access to resources. We must also ensure candidates engage voters early and frequently, because our vote is our power, and we have a duty as a community and our country to protect it. So thank you again for this opportunity, and I look forward to working with all of you to ensure that our community's rights are protected and our vote is valued this election cycle and beyond.
Well, thank you, Catherine, and thank you for those encouraging words and comments that you made and all the great work that you're doing at Latino Victory. Thank you again. It is now my pleasure to introduce another great speaker, Alma Uvierte. Hope I didn't slaughter that too much. But anyway, Alma is the Senior Vice President with Campaigns and Organizing at Common Cause. Alma leads campaigns and organizing at Common Cause, one of the country's most active defenders of voting rights and democratic processes. She will provide a clear-eyed snapshot of the legal and policy landscape and the pressure points that demand our attention today. So Alma, you're next. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Roman. And good afternoon, everyone. I am so thrilled to be here with so many great partners. And I want specifically to thank LULAC for pulling this event together. LULAC, Common Cause, and many partners have been moving at breakneck speed to protect our democracy. Just last month, LULAC and Common Cause sued the state of Texas for conducting an illegal voter purge program. And as the Trump administration tried to end birthright citizenship and open voting rights with illegal executive orders, both organizations sued and backed that work with organizing. That is the power of our partnership. But let's be clear where we all stand right now. We are experiencing a coordinated pressure test on our democracy. And we've seen the previews. In North Carolina, they tried to invalidate voters after a Supreme Court race. In Arizona, they tried to refuse to seat a duly elected representative. Take those as warning shots. Imagine this multiplied by 20, 50 times, all happening at the same time. We need to be ready for that challenge. Legally, we are already in that arena. Common Cause has intervened nearly every time the Department of Justice has tried to compel states to turn over voter private data. And we are suing to stop the administration's latest illegal executive order. If they move to seize machines or purge rolls, we will be ready. We move fast, we are nimble, and we will run to the court when needed. Second, we are on the ground organizing and building an election protection infrastructure to ensure that the voice of voters prevail, and engaging with our partners in scenario planning for everything that may come our way. And this is what fuels me. We are not just responding to a crisis, we are building what we want for our future. We hold two truths at once. We are fighting to build a democracy that works for everyone, because we have not had that yet. And that is exactly the work. We are not just protecting the past. Together, we are architects of what comes next. We are in this fight because we know that democracy that we all want is on the other side. So let's work together to get there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alma. And thank you and Common Cause for all the wonderful work that we're doing with some of the litigation strategies and the litigation work. So thank you again for being with us. And at this moment, I'm going to go ahead and turn over the program to our CEO, Juan Peruano, who helped put all this together. Juan, are you ready? Take it away.
Thank you very much, Roman. So I'm going to be your moderator today. I think this is a very timely and a critically important conversation. But before we begin, I just want to recognize and sincerely thank the organizations who have joined us as co-hosts today. Their partnership isn't just ceremonial. It really reflects a shared commitment to democracy and the communities that we all serve. So our partners, our champions, our co-hosts today, our Common Cause, the League of Women Voters, State Democracy Defenders Fund, Latino Victory, Mi Familia Vota, and the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights. To each of these organizations and the leaders behind them, thank you for standing in this fight alongside us. Your presence today is a testament to the breadth and depth of the coalition that is holding the line for democracy. I would also like to take a moment to thank our media partners, The Contrarian. The Contrarian delivers unflinching journalism in defense of democracy If you don't know them already, please look them up on Substack. Today's conversation is going to feature some of the most experienced, most committed voices in election and administration law and civic engagement in the country. Allow me to briefly introduce them. Cisco Aguilar, Secretary of State, State of Nevada. Cisco serves as Nevada's Secretary of State, where he oversees the administration of elections for a state which nearly 670,000 voters cast mail ballots in the last general election. Secretary Aguilar has been a clear and consistent voice against efforts to manufacture a crisis around mail-in voting, and he brings firsthand experience from the front lines of election administration. Adrian Frontes, Secretary of State, State of Arizona, has served as Arizona Secretary of State through some of the most contested and scrutinized election cycles in recent memory. He has confronted disinformation head-on, defended the constitutional authority of states to run their own elections, and been unequivocal in calling out executive overreach, including publicly leading the recent presidential executive order on mail-in voting as unconstitutional. Also, Selena Stewart, the CEO of the League of Women Voters. Selena Stewart leads one of America's most historic and respected nonpartisan civic organizations. Under her leadership, the League has expanded its reach into communities facing the most acute barriers when it comes to voter participation, and she has been a central coalition partner in the legal battles to defend the right to vote. And finally, Ambassador Norm Eisen. Norm is the former U.S. Ambassador, White House ethics czar, and a leading legal scholar on democracy and constitutional law. As executive chair of the State Democracy Defenders Fund, he has been at the forefront of litigation, challenging unlawful executive actions, including serving as lead counsel for LULAC's landmark litigation on the first presidential executive order, trying to limit voting rights, and also on our birthright citizenship case. So thank you all for being with us here today. And with that, I'm just going to go ahead and just jump right into this conversation. So let's go ahead and get started. And I want to start off with Secretary Aguilar. Election administrators are on the front lines right now. Voter roll purges, new documentation requirements, and now a presidential executive order directing the Postal Service to restrict mail ballot delivery. What does it look like in the ground in Nevada to administer elections responsibly while the rules keep shifting beneath you? And what is your message to the nearly 670,000 Nevadans who vote by mail in 2024?
Well, thank you, Juan, and thank you to all of our partners who are here today. This is a group effort. This is a responsibility of all of us to ensure that our Latino community continues to have a voice as we move forward. If we look at what's happening across the country and we look at the president's attack on Arizona, Nevada, Georgia, and Michigan, that's because they're trying to silence a group of voters that should have a voice. In Nevada, we have 30% of our voters are Latino. But I think a more important stat to understand is that more than 50% of our kids in public schools are Latino. That means the future of Nevada is Latino, and that is the future voter. When these young people hear what the president is trying to do to silence voice, it's going to have generational effects, and we have to push back substantially. Nevadans, we know that the presidential race in 28 is going to run through Arizona, it's going to run through Nevada, and we have to prepare as Secretary of States to fight back. We know that in 26, there are 26 secretary races across the country, and Adrian and I are working extremely hard to ensure that we keep all 13 seats we currently hold, including our battleground states, and flip a couple other seats to ensure that our democracy remains strong. In Nevada, we are fighting every single day to push back on this. This is unfortunate that we're having to even have this conversation. The conversation is already about voters not showing up on election day because they are fearful. We can talk about the legal aspects of the executive orders, the litigation that we are in with the administration, but really the damage is being done by creating the confusion and the chaos that they intend to do. This is a strategy. Look, this administration is not great at execution or strategy, but this is a calculated strategy to ensure that we remain fearful and don't participate. My message to every single voter across the state is this is a time for us to stand up. This is a time for us to have a voice, And this is a time to really speak out against what's happening. The fact that we're having conversations about federal agents being at polling location is just absurd. Thankfully, we have leadership from our U.S. Senator in Nevada, Catherine Cortez Masto, who put a specific clause in the DHS funding bill to keep election polling locations protected sites and inaccessible to federal agents. She remained strong on it. It's one of the reasons the shutdown stayed the way it stayed and took so long is because she continued to fight. We know that that's not the only option. Adrian and I have to continue to work to ensure that we have not only a presence, but also too, we have a litigation strategy, which Norm is there behind us, fighting for us every single day. But we also have to have a direct conversation with our voters to say, we need you to show up. Thankfully, Nevada has universal mail ballot. There are options. In East Las Vegas, where a lot of our Latino community lives, their choice to vote is sometimes in person on election day from 4 to 7. That's because they spend this whole day working hard to provide for their families and then exercise their constitutional right. But again, we have to make sure people feel protected, that they understand their vote will get counted, and we need those votes to move forward. So thank you, everybody, for having this conversation. I look forward to the dialogue, and we're going to continue to fight every single day to make sure that our votes count.
Thank you, Cisco. Thank you for laying that out for us so clearly. Secretary Fontes, Arizona has been ground zero on some of the most aggressive election disputes in the country. You have publicly called out the last executive order unconstitutional. How do states like Arizona push back against federal executive overreach while maintaining public confidence in elections? And how do you ensure that eligible voters, particularly in communities of colors, are not left to bear the cost of these political battles?
Well, the how is what we're doing right now. And before I get too far into this, I want to thank you, Juan, for being here. Selena, my friend Norm, and my cousin Cisco, thank you all for being here with us. And everybody who's watching from all over the country. I was looking at the chat, and folks are here from everywhere. This is a nationwide battle. This is a time when we need to be uncomfortable. I've been saying this out there to folks in every community that I speak with. Now is the time to be uncomfortable. It was not comfortable for the suffragists to do what they needed to do to gain women the right to vote. It was not comfortable for John Lewis and his folks to cross that Edmund Pettus Bridge. It should not be comfortable now for us to continue to confront the madness that we see unfolding. And we're going to continue to do what we've been doing, which includes, let me be so bold as to say, having those conversations with our colleagues that Cisco and I have had with those folks across the aisle. The Department of Justice's unconstitutional request to get sensitive voter data didn't get answered positively by every Republican state. In fact, my favorite example is our colleague, Secretary, I can't remember his name, out in West Virginia, but he's as MAGA as they get, and he is also protecting voter data. We have divisions on the political right that we should be able to capitalize on while we continue to be uncomfortable in these conversations, building coalitions across the aisle, getting to those chambers of commerce, getting into those other political communities where we're not usually comfortable talking to if we're not. Why? Because this is about every eligible voter. This is about all of Americans being able to express their voice. But we have that responsibility to lead. I was, again, looking at the chat, and I saw names of leaders that I recognize and some folks that I may not recognize, but you're all over the country here, folks. It's your job as much as it is our job. We've got to have this conversation and be bold about the conversation with those legislative leaders, with those community leaders, and we've got to make sure we do exactly what it is that Cisco said just a little while ago. We've got to convince folks that not only their voice matters, but that they can get out and vote. And those battles are going to continue. We're having those uncomfortable conversations in Arizona with folks from all across the political aisle to make sure that they're doing their job. The Attorney General and I recently sent out a letter warning essentially the elections directors and other county officials that they should not independently surrender sensitive voter data to the Department of Justice. I know that we've had several other different types of conversations that have been uncomfortable. We're going to be talking to law enforcement agencies across Arizona to make sure they understand their role in enforcing the law in Arizona, which includes a prohibition against armed federal agents being in the polling places. It is against the law, as a matter of fact, in Arizona for anyone but a voter and an election official to be, or a designated observer, to be in a polling place. In fact, the far right has already acknowledged that they know it's against the law. They introduced a bill to make it legal for ICE to be in polling places. That bill didn't go anywhere because of the pressure. So we've got to continue to push. We've got to continue to do the things that we are doing, building the coalitions, opening up those lines of communication, but doing it far enough ahead of time so that if and when something needs to happen, we're ready to address it. And I know everyone on this call feels that. It's time to act on that. And I think this call is a really good starting point to push things forward. And I'm very grateful to have been invited to participate.
Adrian, thank you so much for having this incredibly strong voice. We hear you all the way across the country, and so we're very excited that you're joining us here today.
Thank you.
Selena, the League of Women Voters has been fighting for voting rights for all women and diverse communities for over a century, and you have led the organization now through one of its most turbulent histories. When you look at the cumulative effect of voter roll purges, documentation requirements, and now restrictions on mail voting, what do you see as the common thread, and which communities are most concerned, and which communities are you most concerned about as we head into November?
Yeah, so I mean, I honestly feel like what we're seeing right now is the second coming of slavery. For some people, that may be scary to say and to think about. But what we are seeing, what we saw at the beginning of the administration, was people being swept.
Selena, I'm sorry, we're having a problem with your audio. It's coming up broken up a little bit. Do you have headphones by chance? Or
I do not with
okay. Yeah, it's breaking up a little bit. Okay.
Maybe let me see if I turn off my camera and see if that helps.
Yep. Feels like it was a little bit better there.
Okay, can you hear me better?
No. Maybe if you just log out and come back in, and we'll try again.
I will
Okay.
try.
Thank you, Selena. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. We want to hear you clearly, because I know what you have to say is very important. All right, so we're going to go to Norm in the meantime. Norm, LULAC won its case against the first executive order, and the courts have consistently ruled that the president does not have the constitutional authority to rewrite election law by fiat. What did we learn from that case, and how has that informed your approach and the tactics moving forward?
Thanks, Juan. And Selena, if you don't mind, I think we're getting some feedback from your mic. Terrific. Well, I want to say first what an honor it is to be here as a part of the LULAC family and outside council team, and salute you and Roman, Juan, our colleagues, Catherine and Alma, and of course, two of our great secretaries of state. Can you believe they're cousins? Cisco, Adrian, will anybody accept it if I claim to be the third cousin? Do you think we can persuade any of the 500 folks who are with us today? But we certainly are all una gran familia here today in service of voting and elections being safe, free, and fair. Juan and I talk about this every day, and in the idea that what gives legitimacy to our democracy, like in the legal battle Juan has asked me about, to stop the president's first election takeover executive order, where we succeeded. We're fighting for the idea that what gives legitimacy to our democracy is that the voters get to choose their leaders, not the other way around. I will say that the targeting of the Latino community is one of the worst assaults on that idea of democracy. And in fact, Juan and I and Democracy Defenders Action, together with LULAC, published a report. We just published the second edition, La Gran Mentira, The Big Lie of non-citizen voting in our country. It doesn't happen. It's so infrequent that it's statistically zero. That brings me to Juan's question. Donald Trump used that big lie to put out an executive order last year to take control of our elections. And that was to make it easier for those he perceives as his supporters to vote and harder for everybody else to vote. That's not America. We went to court. We said, wait a minute. The Constitution doesn't give the president any responsibility to issue this kind of an executive order. You could turn the Constitution up, down, and sideways. And we got to court. The states have that authority. That's our friends like Secretary Fontes and Secretary Aguilar. And so we went to court, and the court agreed with us. The order was unconstitutional, struck it down. Why is that so important? That's known as the LULAC case. LULAC was the lead plaintiff. And we were so honored to represent LULAC with a big coalition of folks. Why is that so important? The president is trying it again. And we're back in court with LULAC and other wonderful partners. We're fighting again to protect everyone's vote. That's why it matters, because it is the foundation of our democracy. We're going to fight and win again. Thanks, Juan.
Thank you, Norm. We're going to come back to Selena. Hopefully this is a little bit better. Can we try it again?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh,
Great.
thank God.
Wonderful.
Okay. Well,
do you want me to repeat the question, or do you still have it in mind?
go ahead and repeat it. That's fine.
Okay. When you look at the cumulative effect of the voter roll purges, documentation requirements, and now these restrictions on mail-in voting, what do you see as a common thread, and which communities are you most concerned about as we head into the November cycle?
So thank you, Juan, for this invitation and just so many of the partners who are on this call participating. So the common thread is this is voter suppression in a new costume. Every election, it dresses up in a different way. And I think that the folks that I am most concerned about continues to be marginalized communities. But within those marginalized communities, the Latino community in particular, the API community, and Black voters, they continue to be targeted. These groups continue to be targeted to take them out of the calculus for the outcome of this election. And I think that what I have said this before, and I know it may be alarming to some people, but what we're seeing is the second coming of slavery. We are seeing people, what we saw in the first year of the administration was people literally being swept off the streets, detained, taken to places that they have no origin or familiarity with. We are seeing how that happens in our country right now. And so that really concerns me. But I will say that one of the things that we are doing specifically is the League has always been rooted in local communities. And that's exactly how we are expanding our reach right now. And so as we think about this, we're not starting from scratch. We're building on this nationwide network of states and also more than 750 local leagues that are already have trust in the community. So whether that is mutual aid, one of the things we did at the League was when we were seeing these sweeps happen, we engaged our members to try to do things like walking kids home, going to pick up groceries for people who were not comfortable leaving their homes. But things like that and that community support of each other is so critical right now. But we also have to be very comfortable calling out who the enemy is. There should be no secrets or no shyness about saying who is causing the harm right now. And so regardless of what party you are part of, we should all be able to name why this is happening and who's doing it.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate you so much, Selena, for always being here present with us and in community with us, and also being one of our best and staunch advocates. So thank you, Selena, for that. Cisco, I want to come back to you. So Latino voters in Nevada face both language barriers and deliberate misinformation about eligibility. What concrete operational steps is your office taking to make sure that those voters are not deterred? And how do we build trust with communities that have been given reasons to distrust the system?
Yeah, it's communicating directly to communities, right? It's becoming a trusted messenger. And Adrian does this really well in Arizona, is communicating directly to the voters. We've built some institutional practices from the local level of the counties, being able to allow voters to request a ballot in their native language, right? We know that Spanish speakers are a large percentage. And a large percentage of those voters do request a Spanish ballot, which is great. It's also to being able to text them in Spanish from official channels in the Secretary of State's office to say, you are eligible, you have a constitutional right to vote, here are the dates, here are the things you need to do. Those basic conversations allow us to do that. But then it's also working with our community groups who are on the ground and making sure that we are communicating with them throughout that process. We know that Nevada is a very diverse state from a lot of different perspectives, both geographically, urban versus rural. But we know that Latinos are in those communities across the entire state. So we have to get across. We have to be present. We have to be there to say, we have your back. Continue to do your things. But we also have to be able to listen. We know this guy in Washington, D.C. doesn't understand what it means to put food on the table or to worry about what it means to get your child a strong education so we can become powers of an economic center. We know majority of new business owners in Nevada are Latino. We not only have to look at the voting process, but we have to make sure government as a whole is working for Latinos. We have to make it easier for them to do business in Nevada because once we build economic power, we build political power. And when we have political power, we get people like Adrian and I elected to office to continue to drive those priorities. And that's why I say Secretary of State races are so important in 26 because it's about 28. We know that presidential candidates are going to be coming out of Arizona and Nevada consistently. But if Adrian and I are not in power and we are not elected as secretaries of state, we're not going to be able to drive those Latino priorities. We need your support. We need your help to help us get reelected because then we can make our issues and our community a priority for that future president of the United States. I said this before. The presidential election is going to run through Arizona and Nevada. And Adrian and I have to be at the forefront of that to be able to drive those priorities forward. We shouldn't be having the conversation we're having with this administration now. There should be somebody already in the White House who's advocating for our issues every single day. And that comes down to economic issues. It comes down to the education of our kids. It comes down to ensuring that we feel confident to be able to have a voice. And until we have a voice, we're going to continue to have these conversations, but that can change with Adrian and I continuing to do the work that we can do.
And we are, Cisco, so grateful because for the record, we have all the Latino Secretary of States on this call today, right? All of them are here with us today. And that makes it, very special for me.
Well, and that's Adrian and I say this all the time. This is a family business to us. Adrian has responsibility for my mom. He has responsibility for my dad and my brothers in Arizona. But I am confident to know they're going to continue to have a voice because of his leadership. But we can't do it with all of us here today. We have Norn's back, protecting us from a legal perspective, giving us the strong legal strategy to win the cases. In 24, I had over 30 lawsuits against my office over the election. We have to play the game as tough as they are, but we have to do it strategically, and we have to do it with all of us on this call together.
Yep. And I want to give a shout out to all of our LULAC members in Arizona and Nevada, Ana Valenzuela, who's just always so an incredible advocate for us, and all the League of Women Voters, members in those states as well. So thank you to our membership too. Adrian, Arizona has been a target of sustained disinformation campaigns since 2020. How do you confront false narratives about election integrity before they take hold? And what responsibility do you believe the federal government bears when its own rhetoric becomes a source of disinformation?
Well, I'll start with the federal government. Look, the reframing of agencies like CISA, when they were seeking out, identifying, and then warning about misinformation and disinformation, that was called censorship by the current administration. And it was really this administration that put election administration into that critical infrastructure space and then built it up into those protections, and then now have hamstrung CISA from being able to help us out. So this administration's hypocrisy and their incapacity to understand what this country is really about, and the fact that the diversity of our ideas in that free conversation needs to be A, factual, B, accessible, and C, administrable, right? Through our elections, we get that eventual agreement. I think they're just lost. And so, under this current administration, I have no confidence that there's going to be accountability, particularly since in Congress, the majority has completely abdicated their responsibility to be an independent branch of government. So we'll leave the federal government to its own mess, and we will respond the way that we need to through the efforts of a variety of folks across the country, including in our states and nationally by folks like Norm and LULAC and a lot of these other folks that are fighting it. But as for Arizona, the way we confront it is forcefully. We call it out when we see it, and we set up the truth as we move through the process. We will have we will do town halls. We will go out and visit, but we're also making sure. And Cisco alluded to this a little bit. You know, becoming a trusted messenger doesn't mean that you say the same thing over and over again until people believe it. That's some other techniques that we avoid. But becoming a trusted messenger means that you show the legitimacy of the office holder in the office through the methods of actually serving. So when in my portfolio, I don't have a motor vehicle division, some secretaries do, but I do have a big role in filings for limited partnerships, foreign investment into the state, a variety of other business services. I run the library archives and public records. And so communicating to a variety of different places and spaces through those avenues, as well as election administration, gives me the authoritative voice to become and to continue to build a trusted sort of space where people will gather their information. So they know if we're helping with rural libraries and we're helping with small business formation, they're going to trust us more when we bring them information on elections. So there's a multi-pronged approach that we use here in Arizona to make sure that folks are looking to the Secretary of State's office as that trusted source of information. I know those types of efforts are happening in offices across the country, but for us, it's a multi-pronged, multifaceted approach. It is truth-telling, it is service providing, and just like Cisco says, and I know he does it a little differently in Nevada just because the offices are set up a little differently, we're out there being those good governance public administrators, those good governance public servants, servant leaders, and as we continue to say what we need to say, setting up for the discussions that we're going to have when the misinformation comes, when the lies come. And let's be really clear. We've been hearing the exact same misinformation, disinformation, and conspiracy theories from the beginning of this misadventure. They're coming in different forms, and they're going to come hot and heavy in ways that we're going to need to be ready to react to. The advent of artificial intelligence and generative artificial intelligence, the way messages can get really drilled into individual voters, individual registrants through these very important technical tools that have great benefit, but they also can be used for great evil. We've got to be able to approach all of these things. So planning for it, funding for it, and then laying that communication foundation across the entire institution really builds us into a spot where we can have a fighting chance when it comes to the lies and misinformation.
Thank you, Adrian. Thank you so much for that. We love Arizona, but I just go back to SB 1070 and the challenges that we've had really since that time. And so we got to keep fighting for an Arizona that respects all of our civil rights. I want to get into some of the legal and structural pressure points. I want to come back to Norm on this. So Norm, the courts have been very clear that the president does not have constitutional authority to rewrite election law unilaterally. Yet here we are again, 2 weeks out from a second executive order with the midterm approaching. Walk us through the legal landscape. Where do you expect this new order to land in the courts? What is the timeline and what provisions pose the greatest immediate threat to voters if enforcement is not blocked?
Well, Juan, it takes a village, and the full coalition and League of Women Voters is fighting. Our state AGs are fighting. Our wonderful partners who we work with every day, like the Brennan Center and the ACLU, everybody has gone back to court. There's two separate lanes. There's one set of litigants, including LULAC, represented by us, and the Campaign Legal Center, which, by the way, the chair of the board is the longtime Republican elections lawyer and my dear friend, Trevor Potter. These are not partisan issues. There's the cases in DC, and there's the cases in Boston where the AGs and some of the other civil rights groups are. In our DC case, we're moving expeditiously and anticipate that within days we'll be seeking preliminary injunctive relief. Yes, and the wonderful Chris Mays in Arizona, the wonderful Aaron Ford in Nevada, and our state AGs have been such a part of this coalition. Juan, you at LULAC, together with us as your lawyers and the state AG in California and other partners, litigated the Prop 50 case side by side to have more seats created to counterbalance the illegitimate national effort by Donald Trump to take away Latino and Black seats in Congress. We stopped that in the Prop 50 trials side by side with the AGs. They're very important partners. So expect this issue of getting an injunction to be queued up in the days ahead in these cases. And we're confident because the Constitution is so clear of our chances of success. Now, that is only the beginning of the 2026 litigation fights. And we are ready across the country for every different thing that may be thrown at us. There's a group of us who've litigated together for many years. And I want people to take this away from the litigation wins that we've described that we've done with LULAC. League of Women Voters has had so many wins, Cisco and Adrian, but also the strength of what you've heard from these other speakers, every person on the webinar today, but particularly our secretaries. We are going to peacefully and lawfully, but vigorously fight in the court of law and in the court of public opinion, like on this webinar, to explain what it's all about. And we are going to win. Si se puede.
Thank you, Norm.
Can I add something here, Juan?
Of course.
I just want to plus one everything Norm said. I also want to just make sure we are aware that we're, if we zoom out a little bit, even the mail-in voting EO that came out recently, that was in response to something. The administration is reacting just like people are around the country. The SAVE Act has been moving through the legislature, Congress, for months. And because it has been stalled, because of how much advocacy these groups on this call have been doing, the president then moved to do an EO. He did the same thing last year when he did the EO around voting as well. And we got that early win then and just shut it down because he's trying everything he can to find different ways to get what he needs accomplished. But the reality is this: what people are doing on the ground is working. The noise that's being created is working. The pushback that we are doing is working because it's forcing other groups, the government in particular, to update and change their strategy to find another way to get things done. And so I think that we have to take a moment and recognize that that is part of what this larger landscape is that the fight is working. The fight that people are doing on the ground is working. And so I think that as this radar, this goalpost continues to move, that we're going to move with it, whether that is in a proactive stance or whether that's in a defensive stance, to make sure that we can save our country. And I think at the end of the day, we understand what that is, but we have to make sure that we understand that this fight continues, whether it's on the legislative front, whether it's on the litigation front. And I'm so grateful that the League is able to be a plaintiff alongside LULAC in many of these cases, alongside with many of our partners in these cases, to push back. And whether that's providing League members as plaintiffs or LULAC members as plaintiffs, or using the weight of our organizations to push back on what the administration is doing. So I just wanted to mention that.
No, thank you, Selena. And so, I get these calls all the time from Norm and our pro bono legal partners that are out there. We work on these declarations with our members too, but the names that always come up: League of Women Voters, Common Cause. Plaintiffs in dozens and dozens of these cases, and so I appreciate all that incredible leadership, Selena, from you and League of Women Voters. I want to come back to Adrian here a little bit on the legal structures. The executive order also directs the Attorney General to prioritize investigation and prosecution of election officials who do not comply with its mandates. That is a direct threat to state administrators doing their jobs. How do you and your colleagues respond to that level of federal pressure? And what does it mean for the independence of state election administration going forward?
Well, I'll be, for me, it's different than for a lot of the other administrators out there. Let's not forget, this isn't just about two secretaries of state or battleground secretaries or 50 secretaries. This is about tens of thousands of people out there who are clerks in city offices, in parish offices, in county offices. They may be elected commissioners or election directors who are appointed all over the place are falling into this. And there's real concern out there as we talk to elections officials across Arizona and having been a county election official, I've got a good connectivity with folks across the country, and they're concerned. But the bottom line is it's support from folks like you that really matters. And Cisco's plea earlier for that type of support is really important because the thing that strengthens us and pushes us forward is knowing that we have folks behind us. The thing that pushes county recorders, for example, in Arizona forward is the fact that they know we're going to have their back. They know that the attorney general is going to have their back. They know that organizations like those on this call are going to have their back. And the thing that pushes a guy like me forward is all of that, and knowing that we've got sort of the wind at our back as we push forward through this thing. Let's not forget to kind of add on to what Selena was saying. Folks are recognizing out there that what happened to Viktor Orban in Hungary, and thank goodness there's a peaceful transfer of power that my office has already recognized. People are seeing special elections like that Turning Point endorsed slate of possible SRP commissioners, the Salt River Project, a special district, just had an election in Arizona. The Turning Point candidates lost by a 2-1 margin in that special election. And we're seeing that happen across the country. And so the thing that Selena was talking about, sort of the slow march that we're all engaged in, we've got the wind at our backs as it pertains to making sure that the voice of the people is heard. And those threats are going to continue to ring hollow as long as we are, I think, appropriate in our response to them. So when we call them unconstitutional, we invite folks to read Section 1, Article 4 of the Constitution and challenge them. Where does it say president? Just read it. Make the argument simple and then continue to push forward, because the president doesn't have a role except as it pertains, possibly in signing a law that Congress passes. And so when we look at these things, we have to find the right ways to let people know across the board, whether they are voters, whether they are election administrators, whether they are political figures who are out there spouting stuff, or really scared or worried among any of those groups. Clutch the pearls for a moment and then take that nervous energy and push it into action. Make sure that you're being heard. Make sure that you're acting, because I'm a big fan of sort of that. You'll forgive, Ambassador, because I know you were part of the Hopi changey administration of a former president. I'm a big believer in hope, but I'm a bigger fan of the Princess Leia brand of hope, because she's the one that picked up a weapon and started fighting to fight. Right. And so that metaphor for me is that hope has to be backed up by action. And we on this call, just by being here, are expressing part of that action. So stay engaged. And one last thing, contact your local elections officials. Find out who actually does what along the way in your communities, in your states, and give them the kind of support that they need. Let them understand that they've got allies out there, whether or not they're part of your partisan background or whatever, because we are all in this together. And there's plenty of folks on the other side of the political aisle who still want all their voters to vote, and they still want to follow the law. And they recognize the illegality, but they need the support that everybody else is getting too. So we're all in this together.
Yeah, thank you, Adrian. Cisco, if you could change one thing, one policy, one law, one norm, one practice that would do the most to expand and protect voting access for communities at risk, what would it be, and what would it take politically to make that happen?
It would get the conversation of ICE being at polling locations out the door. Nevada only meets its legislature every other year. We don't have a legislative session coming up before the election. As I said, our U.S. Senator was working to put that in the DHS funding bill. But if we could get the conversation about ICE off the table, that would help really strengthen our community. And that brings me to an ask. One is, our elections work because of the people. We need everybody on this call in every one of your communities to be poll workers. If we have poll workers who look like our voters, speak the language of our voters. The voters will feel confident, they will feel comfortable, they will know somebody has their back at the polling location, and they will show up. And that's how we push back against ICE, is we bring our community to the polling locations to be the defenders of that fundamental right to vote among all of us. Just because we may not have English as our native language does not mean we do not have a constitutional right to vote. So please sign up to be poll workers, make voters feel comfortable about being safe in their polling locations. But then again, learn about what Adrian and I are doing across the country to ensure that voter access remains a priority. Our Latino community continues to have a voice and has a seat at the table. We need to continue to have that seat at the table. And I believe our links are being sent out to show you where we can work and what we can do to continue the fight. But thank you. Thank you to all the partners too for giving us the opportunity to have the conversation today. It doesn't end today. The hard work is coming and the fight is going to continue to happen, but we will continue to push and fight harder back.
Cisco, I appreciate you bringing that up because one of the conversations we've had here is, in addition to promoting the vote this election, we also have to protect the vote. And so we're working with Norm, with our other partners to ensure that LULAC has the strongest voter protection legal effort in this country. And so we're actively working on that, and not just by ourselves, with our partners who are on this call today. And you will see more from us coming in the weeks and the months to come. We got a couple of minutes here, and what I'd like to do is kind of sort of just go right to the end. There'll be a couple calls to action, but Norm, you've spent your career here at the intersection of law, democracy, and accountability. Looking forward for 2026 and past this administration, what institutional reforms would make American democracy more resilient against this kind of executive overreach? What do we need to build such a future, and what tools can we give our advocates to continue this fight moving forward?
Juan, we need to establish under federal law the kind of common sense solutions that commanded bipartisan support for decades in our country. The John Lewis Voting Rights Act, for example, that's long been, Selena knows this, that's been the law of the land. Both parties supported it. The For the People Act, achieving things like true nonpartisan redistricting. What is the fairness of President Trump saying we need to have partisan redistricting for red states, but not in blue states? There needs to be a single nationwide set of standards that protect the right to vote. We need to properly fund voting in this country. We've never done that. And that includes making funds available for cybersecurity and other forms of protection that our secretaries need. So there's we've put these common sense reforms together under the For the People Act, which very nearly passed Congress, and the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. And those bills have to be front and center to restore sound voting rights in our country. And that's where I would begin, Juan. Thank you for having me here today with these heroes of our democracy.
Oh, thank you, Norm. Thank you for that. I want to just a point as we begin to close up here in reflections, and this isn't for our speakers, this is for everyone that's with us today. I want you to think about, as you get off of this call, what is the one thing that must happen between now and this election to protect the right to vote? Think about that, and think about what it is that you can actually do to make a difference in this upcoming election. It can be at a local level, in your district, at a state level, at a national level, and connect with the organizations that are on this call today and see how you can support, become a member, volunteer, donate, get out there and advocate for our communities and for your communities as well. So as we bring this to a close, first of all, I want to thank all of you, all of our speakers, our co-hosts, the Contrarian, our media partner, and to every person that has joined us today in this conversation. For 97 years, LULAC has stood at the proposition that every eligible American, regardless of where they come from, what language they speak, or what community they belong to, has the right to be heard and counted. That mission has never been more important than it is right now. The work does not end here. It only begins here. Stay engaged, know your rights, support all of the speakers here and their organizations, and make no mistake, LULAC, the League of Women Voters, State Democracy Defenders, our friends at Mi Familia Vota, Latino Victory, and the Leadership Conference on Civil Rights are here to defend the vote for everyone. It is our civic duty in order to do so. I want to thank everyone for joining us today and making this time and spending it with us. Thank you. Thank you all.